Hey everybody, Sayre at Nova Motorcycles once again. This week we're having another look back on a bike we did a video on, I don't know, a few months back. If you check our video history, you'll see it. It's a 1975 Kawasaki Z1, part of our discussions on the first generation of super bikes. This was a game-changing bike, pretty cool. So you can check out that video if you want. But this one, basically, we're at a place where it's some interesting decisions get made on restoration. It's a pretty crusty bike, as you can tell. The motor was seized, and what we found when we tore the top end down was not only were the pistons seized, but as you can sort of see right here, the liners themselves broke free from the cylinder, and the pistons are seized to the liners, and the liner was actually moving up and down once we got the head off. So if you look back at our shorts on the YouTube channel, we actually have some funny videos of the liners going around and around, but the pistons are stuck solid. So we have filled it up with goo, we've gotten it hot, and we couldn't get the pistons to break free, so we left it for a while, and it's sitting here soaking. Eventually we'll get them apart, and it's going to need new cylinders. So we actually had one comment on the liners video about saying, well, isn't that held in by the heads? I think somebody was making a joke, but the reason why these things cannot be loose is because of heat transfer, especially in an air-cooled bike like this. All of your heat from combustion is going into this steel liner, which is then going into the, I'm sorry, it's an iron liner, going into the iron liner, which is then touching the aluminum, and the heat gets dissipated, radiated out on these fins. If there's even the smallest gap between the iron and the aluminum, the iron overheats, your piston overheats, you have seizures, you have motor failure, essentially. So it's a critical point that has to be right. But someone might look at this and say, well, why don't you just get a new motor? This thing is pretty much toasted. And one of the decisions we make on something like that is, does this bike have inherent value? This bike really does. The Kawasaki Z1, look at our video, look at the history of the bike. You can Google it, and you're going to find tons of Cycle World and Cycle Magazine articles talking about it. It's a game-changing bike, and very important to the history of motorcycling. And it's got value, and it has more value if it has the motor that it came from the factory in. That's key. I don't know enough about Kawasaki's to know if they actually match the numbers coming out of the factory. A lot of manufacturers do. That's called a matching numbers bike. You'll see that in descriptions. But even if they don't, you can tell by the number and by the factory records if it's correct. So you want to have the correct engine for your machine. That's inherent value in the machine. So even though it's going to cost more to save this rather than finding another donor engine and rebuilding that one, it's really worth it to have these engine cases go with the bike. Another factor in old stuff like this is there isn't that much out there anyway. We could probably find a donor engine. It would not be cheap for this, again, back to the inherent value of it, but also because as time goes on, there's just there's fewer and fewer of available replacement engines and stuff. So this is a work in progress. Sometimes when we get to an old machine, we just have to let it sit with some penetrating oil in it for a while, because that's going to do far more than we could do to get it apart. And when we do get it apart, we'll be looking for a brand new set of jugs. Obviously, it's going to need pistons. But the funny thing is, I'm 99% sure this bottom end is A-OK. It looks horrible. It's had some problems happen to it. But from what we see, this is not that abnormal to have a totally wrecked from sitting top end and have the bottom end just really come out clean once we clean everything up and go through it. So eventually, this will be a runner again. And in our opinion, it's worth it for the owner of this bike to put our time, and therefore his money, into getting this right, because it's going to be much more valuable when it's a runner, and this bike will continue to increase in value as you go on. A lesser bike, something a little newer, not as important, it's probably not worth it, and we have that conversation with customers all the time. Is it worth it? Big question. A lot of different answers. So thanks for watching. As usual, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned as this thing gets going.